love to hear your insight into relationships between the artist and, the venue, that you're playing at. Like, is that like, what is that like? Do you feel like that is something that needs to be, especially if you're, for example, you guys were playing in New York a lot. Did you find that it was important to cultivate relationships with like the particular venues you were working to book with? And then a side tangent of that, um, did you ever find it helpful to like those relationships you mentioned when you were on tour with like you meet other bands and stuff? Was that ever helpful in booking future gigs or like in the New York scene? Like, did you find to like cultivate relationships with other bands for like double billings and things like that? Yeah, so relationships.
Yes to everything.
Okay,
Everything. Um, I'll go general and then we can go into a little bit more
totally.
specifics like New York. Love this chair, right? All
It's
right.
awesome.
Just stay perfectly still. Sound like you
It
know
feels
what
like
you're
we're in.
saying.
It feels like we're in the room. It's nice. I like it.
8D. All right. So, first of all, there is something very rock and roll about talking smack about venues. Oh, these guys are terrible. They screwed us over. This promoter's terrible. It's so rock and roll. It's like destroying a hotel room, throwing a TV out the window. Don't do it. Just don't do it.
Right.
This is a business and there is a professionalism you should always have. There are
Mhm.
times where you can sort of bend the envelope a little bit. Maybe there's a little bit more of an act to it. But, you know, it's something as simple as just making sure that you're there on time for the sound check, making sure the sound engineer, whoever's doing sound, gets to do their job with as little fussing as possible. They'll remember that, absolutely 100%. There are places that we would play at where we 100% knew the staff and they were happy to see us. It didn't matter if maybe we weren't pulling the most people that night. You set up, we set up quick. We set up efficiently. We had good gear. It always worked.
Mhm.
We knew how to sound check. We knew how to not waste time. We knew the protocols. And I take a lot of pride in always being able to have the setup down pat to a
Yeah.
T. Our band could probably set up sometimes in 6 minutes, I would think.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. I'm lying, maybe 7, but we could set up pretty quickly. And that would be that. I think venues, that sound engineers, that whole thing, that goes a long way.
Yeah.
And I think when you stand out for doing things like that, the venue will notice, the owners will notice, and that gives you a really good opening to develop a relationship, a working thing where maybe you need to do a show, and for
Yeah.
whatever reason, you get dropped, and you're like, oh, can't we know we have our EP release coming out? We just got dropped here. Can we do it? Yeah, you can.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, there is a rock and roll, lovely youthful rebellion of just, oh, this place is terrible. This engineer is awful. You could like curse him out like your Axl Rose. Terrible idea. Probably Axl Rose was cursing out his own employee. It's not the same. You know, they're not. You're there. You're in their spot. They
Hmm.
employed you essentially. They hired you to you're paying. Well, no, you're really paying them usually for the room anyway, which is why, for
Right.
example, when you're selling tickets, you don't get 100% of the cut because the venue needs to make money. They have to cut. They have to take care of their overheads. Whether it's making sure the engineer is paid or making sure that I guess probably the bar staff gets a cut. However they want to do it. If you can get the full door, that's awesome. Although they usually got to pay someone who's literally at the door collecting money.
Right.
I mean, this is
Yep.
this is this is a business. Oh no, I lost train of thought with what else you were saying. You said
Oh, like
cultivating,
so
and then with other bands, right?
relationships with other
Yeah,
bands. Yeah. Was that
yeah.
helpful? Is that
Yeah.
helpful? Yeah.
Listen, there's been so many times where I have absolutely tried to help out other bands.
Hmm.
that are having like little things. Maybe a cable doesn't work here, borrow mine. There was one show where this band was playing. I knew the one member. We had chatted a lot, but we hadn't really met up all that much.
Hmm.
We know each other for a little bit, and his guitar stopped working in the middle of the gig, and he's like
Oh,
freaking out.
wow.
I was like, "Yeah, I'll take my
Yeah,
guitar. Just don't smash it."
that's awesome.
I thought that
Yeah,
was a fair
yeah,
trade. That's
definitely.
important to me. You know, hey, do you need a tuner? You need a drum key?
Yeah,
Why wouldn't you want to do that? You know,
yeah.
everyone needs a little help sometimes. And what I can tell you is that, man, I don't know what it is, but there is some kind of magic about being at the gig where stuff happens that's never happened to you ever before. Something stops working that has always worked every time, but
Hmm.
just stops working, you know, or you forgot something that you've never forgotten ever. So it's
Yeah,
nice to know, I would say that, you know, that bands could be out there to help each other out. And again, why wouldn't you? And if you've worked together before, it's a no-brainer to me. You know,
right. Yeah,
if you already know the band, it's a no-brainer. If they need help, you know, the mic stand falls over in the middle of the set, go pick it up,
yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Do not expect the venues to do anything because again, I think there's a misconception of like you see a rock and roll show and the microphone and someone's picking that mic stand up. Yeah, that's the band's roadie that they are paying on their
Yeah,
payroll. The venue
yeah.
is just a host. That's all they
Right.
are. They're just a
Yep.
host. You know, you need a place to play. They have a place to play. But it's also really fun to make friends with bands. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a romanticism that I love of like watching like early 90s like Seattle shows with
Hmm.
like Nirvana and Soundgarden and Tad and whatever, Sonic Youth, and they're all friends. They all know each other. So the bill is nothing but friends. I've done some bills like that. Those are my favorite bills. When I had all bands on the bills, especially if I was able to put them together, if I had all bands on the bills that were friends, that were cool people to hang out with. I mean, the band itself, just the bands brought so
Yeah.
much energy to the crowd. And then
Yeah.
sometimes, you know, and this is kind of like a meme. I think different genres do that, but then there's sometimes when you're playing in front of the band and the band is in the crowd just like watching you like this,
Yeah.
like they're not
Right.
having a
Right.
good time.
Yeah.
I mean, if you really bad, I guess sure, why not? But I mean, it's you could call it competition, but I don't know. I think it's very it's a friendly competition. Like, hey man,
Right.
we're gonna play better than you. No, we're gonna play better than you. I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
you know, that's not bad. You know,
Right.
you don't want to be like rude and arrogant about it, but you know, you want to push each other. There's a story
Yes.
that I remember hearing about. Henry Rollins was playing
Yeah.
after Iggy Pop, and
Hmm.
I guess this was when he was in the Rollins band, and he was always following Iggy Pop, and I guess let's say they played 4 shows together, and like the first show, Rollins like, oh, this is no. He played before Iggy Pop, not after Iggy Pop. I think so. And Henry Rollins is pretty crazy, so he's going nuts,
Yeah.
and then Iggy's like, uh-oh, you know, wait, let's stand back. I'll show you how it's done. Then the second show, he tries to go a little harder. Then Iggy goes a little harder. Third show, and then the fourth show, Henry Rollins is like, yeah, I just went absolutely nuts. I like screamed. I ripped everything apart. And Iggy looked at me and he was like, oh, you bastard. And then Iggy still had to top him. I love those stories. I think that's awesome.
That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah.
But no, there's no reason to have an antagonistic approach with bands. And there's also no
Hmm.
reason to feud with bands, to argue with bands
Right.
in the middle of a show. Again, it's very rock and roll to be like, yeah, man, we're Nirvana. We hate Guns N' Roses. Yeah, man. But
Right.
like, again, if you're talking about like that specific example, like Nirvana, I mean, they had their core audience.
Right.
And they were just like, oh my God, like they were worshipped, rightfully so. They're awesome.
r-
And
Right.
then they just wanted to just point it and go like, those guys over there though, they're not awesome. If you like us, you can't like them. I like
Hmm.
both. Guilty.
Yeah. Yeah.
But Nirvana way more. So let's go Team
Right.
Nirvana. I've never been a part of anything like that. Never, not once.
Hmm.
I could tell you there's some experiences where we had bands that were pretty damn rude. But we
It's
just,
so weird.
you know, you just keep your distance.
Yeah.
I mean, it's lame. I don't like it. Especially like when, okay, let's say you brought all the people and the other bands didn't.
Hmm.
That doesn't mean that band couldn't bring other people. Maybe this just wasn't their night to bring people.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So,
Right.
you know, we've had instances where, yeah, the night before we pulled 50 and then tonight we're pulling 10. And then you pulled 50 and we pulled 10.
Right.
That is an unwarranted ego. Unwarranted ego is I find myself disgusted with unwarranted ego. You know, I have no problem with like a Ricky Henderson saying he's the greatest of all time when he's like the greatest of all time.
Yeah.
I have a problem with, you know, with people who are acting like they're the greatest of all time. Again, and this goes back to what I was saying earlier about like, you just played in front of 120 people. Wow, you're awesome. But were those 120 people there to see you specifically? Or were you the opening act and the person, you know, you could tell right away who's here for what. I mean,
Yep.
and we've been the band that people have come to see. You know, our EP released 2018. That was
Yeah, okay.
awesome. You know, I don't know how many people we pulled. Let's say it was 60 or 70 on a Tuesday, probably. And the other
Right.
bands that played, they're great. And they got enthusiasm because, you know, our friends and everything, you know, they're not jerks. But when we
Right.
played, we got that opening, like, woo, when we come out on stage. You don't always get that,
awesome.
you know? It's
Yeah,
really nice.
yeah.
It's really nice.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question? I
No,
went through a lot. I went through a
I-
lot on that one.
I absolutely love it, and
All
it
right.
totally does. It totally does.
All
Yeah, it's the ego. That's such a great point about, you know, like you said, not over in your own head, not overdoing like, oh yeah, I played in front of 120 people. They were all here for me, so I'm the greatest band ever. And yeah, realistic expectations.
Yeah, real.
So
You don't hear this stuff very often.
no.
I was
And
like, yeah,
I
the
think
show was amazing. Everything was wonderful, and the staff was great, and we're just so blessed to be here. No, that's a
Yeah.
little bit of it. I'm not a hippie,
Yeah.
so no. It's more like, okay, yeah, we pulled 30 of this 120 crowd, and maybe of that of let's say, all right, let's do some math. Let's have some fun. You bring 30 of a crowd of 120. I just lost it. That's like 90 people that are not there to see you. Let's say
Yeah.
1/3 of them are like, oh, this band's pretty good. That's 30. And of those ones like, oh, this band was pretty good, 10 are like, oh yeah, I should follow them right there. All of a sudden, you've got 60 people that couldn't care less.
right.
Now, you
Right.
should absolutely 100% do everything in your power to get their attention, to say, hey, you guys need to listen to us. We're really
Yeah,
good.
100%. Yeah.
But I said, just
That's
don't
also-
lie to yourself. Just don't lie to yourself.